Hello and welcome to the Global Dialogue. I'm Shereen Bhan. It's not every day that you get to meet someone who has created history, quite literally. My guest today is the first woman to take over as the CFO at HSBC in its 160-plus year history. Pam Kaur, what an absolute pleasure to have you join us on the Global Dialogue, and welcome back to India.
Thank you, Shereen. It's lovely to be here and to share with you my thoughts on my journey.
And that's exactly where I want to start, Pam. Before we talk about all things HSBC, I want to talk about all things Pam. How did the journey into the world of finance, into the world of banking start for you? I mean, you grew up in Chandigarh. That's where you went to school and college. How did this happen?
I went to school, college, and also did my MBA in Chandigarh. I had the opportunity to do my summer placement with IBM in UK. My parents have always lived in the UK, and that's when I thought, well, I think I need to go into finance and be a chartered accountant. And I joined Ernst & Young, and from there on, just stayed pretty steadfast in banking since 1990.
And it's, you know, over 3 decades now of being in the banking industry. But, you know, from the days in Chandigarh to Punjab University to Ernst & Young to now HSBC, what would you say have been some of the defining moments where you really found your voice and your feet?
So when I started in banking, or indeed even in Ernst & Young, clearly the world was very different. There were much fewer sort of role models from a female perspective. And as somebody who had grown up in India, to go to the UK, it was an effort I'd made to say, this is the journey I want. And for me, when I faced the biggest challenges, typically through macro environment challenges, that's when I learned the most. And it's then you sort of start thinking, if I can live through this, I can live through anything. And that gives you that confidence to continue. And as I've grown through my career, it's that experience and that confidence that's helped me through.
You know, as I said, you've created history, becoming the first woman to take over as CFO at HSBC in 160-plus years, Pam. You know, take me back to that moment when the announcement happened, and what was going on in your head at that point in time?
You know, you sort of think through the journey of your career, as you've quite rightly outlined. At one level, it's deeply humbling, because when I started my career, I never thought I would do a role like this. It's not because I wasn't ambitious, but then I was also quite realistic. So when the opportunities came, I obviously embraced them. And I also thought that as I worked through this journey, how I perform, the sense of responsibility you carry, not for just yourself to do your best, but also others, perhaps who, seeing your path, may have that little bit more confidence to continue their journey. So it's that sense of responsibility and chance to inspire others that truly motivates me. So it was thinking about Pam and then thinking about the others who may follow your footsteps.
You know, but Pam, you're a role model, without doubt, for millions of young women and men as well, and parents who are watching this program. You know, and as you said, it wasn't a lack of ambition, but with experience, you get the confidence, you get that sense of authority. But who was it when you were growing up that inspired you? Where did you look for, you know, or where did you find the role models when you were growing up?
So when I was growing up, I was in a good position to have leadership roles. So I was a school pupil leader right from my school days. So I had those opportunities come at a very young age. You know, you become your class prefect and then the school prefect, and you live through those moments. So there was not one specific individual that I really kind of looked up to, but I always thought about leadership to be more like, you know, the real leaders of this world, the Mahatma Gandhis, the Martin Luther Kings, the leaders who rise above everything that you see around. So that's the leadership journey for me that I always aspired to. Nowadays, I must say, I also look at some very good football coaches who are
Really?
excellent in motivating their teams. Absolutely.
Are
And
you
that's why I get
passionate about
interested.
football?
Yes, absolutely. So Jurgen Klopp.
What team are you backing?
Well, at the moment, I'm not really backing any team, but I did back one manager because I thought he was such an excellent team manager, to say, what can I learn from somebody like Jurgen Klopp, who was the manager and to a great extent behind the glory that Liverpool as a football club had, that I thought I can learn from there and bring out the best out of my team. And that's what really drives good performance.
Well, speaking about driving good performance, you're here in India with the rest of the HSBC Global Board. You've had meetings with government ministers, including the Finance Minister, the Commerce Minister. What is your read on what's happening in India today? I mean, the macroeconomic, indicators are all very stable at this point in time. Of course, the geopolitical mix is uncertain. But what's the read on India as you observe it?
So for us, India is a very important part of our franchise. Right from the time when the first ATM came in India in 1987, it was an HSBC ATM. Now, many years later, it's the country which has the largest number of our colleagues and employees based in India. You know, we have 45,500 people, so we are deeply embedded in India. I have my roots in India, and I must say, I feel really proud in terms of how the country's economics has progressed over the years. And by that I mean the fiscal discipline, the stability that from a finance and an investment perspective you see in terms of how India is perceived. You look at the resilience of the economy. That is a huge factor for anybody looking at India from the outside in. And I'm a great believer that given the demographics in India, given where the youth is and the real enthusiasm in the country to make things happen, the energy you can absolutely feel when you're in the country, that says it all.
So what is that going to mean in terms of accelerating the existing priorities for HSBC in India? As you pointed out, 45,000 people in India for HSBC. In terms of contributors, it is amongst your top 5 markets. What would you prioritize for India, given the mix that you see today?
It's a priority market for us. In our strategy, we always look at things where we have a competitive advantage. And the areas we are focused on is international connectivity as well as wealth. I genuinely believe that the gift city proposition is a very big opportunity both for India and the businesses that we want to grow in India. So that is the one strong call out at this point of time.
So amplifying your presence in gift city?
Yes, investing in gift city, doing a multi-product offering, focusing on the growth of wealth in the gift city, as well as supporting our corporate clients with the opportunities the gift city brings.
You talked about corporate clients, and that's a big part of your business here in India. Given what we are seeing happen today, Pam, what's the sense that you get, both in terms of inbound FDI as well as outbound FDI from India? Because, M&A activity is starting to pick up as well.
So from an India perspective, it is an economy which is very vibrant. It has all the right drivers in both how the economy has been managed, but as well as I said, given the demographics, what's the future? So therefore, the FDI, I think, will continue to come into the country. In terms of outbound, as people want to diversify, that outbound flow will also be there. So I would say this truly is not just a decade for India, because we know India is going to be on target or ahead of target to be the 3rd largest economy, by 2027. I would say in terms of the connectivity India has today, it's in a very different space to when I was growing up in India. So all the existing macroeconomics as well as the forward outlook makes it a very optimistic space for people to invest in as well as to grow their businesses.
You know, speaking about growth, let's talk about what's happening globally as well, because that is in many ways linked to what we're seeing happen in India. The US, of course, has been called out as the growth market as far as HSBC is concerned. With everything that's happening geopolitically, do you still believe, do you still have the conviction that it is going to continue to be able to drive the kind of growth estimates that you have for it?
From an India, our growth markets from India perspective is pretty much right up there. And yes, there is macroeconomic uncertainty. I always believe there are things you can control and the things you have to respond to. And as long as you have the right discipline, the right drive and focus on things you can control, you have a great future. And that's how I look at both our presence in India as well as a growth trajectory. I mean, there are other important markets for us in the Middle East, in the rest of Asia. We just are in markets which have the inherent advantage of being high growth markets, and our proposition is very focused to drive the most operating leverage we can in those markets for our performance as well as to support our customers.
You know, as CFO today, what are the things that keep you up at night? What are the risk factors that you're kind of obsessively tracking at this point in time?
I'm a CFO, but I've also been a Chief Risk and Compliance Officer.
Yes, you have.
So I'm kind of used to worrying about things, but I've been in the industry for long enough to have the right perspective so that you don't get to be in a situation overwhelmed or overreact to things that you see just here and now. The way I'm looking at it at the moment is I'm looking at, okay, our own focus has to be pretty steadfast. You can't just chop and change. There are macro factors which are constantly shifting and moving. And actually, as you can see, both from a market perception, the world that we live in today, in terms of the volatility that we consider it as part of the norm, is very different than what we saw, say, maybe the pre-COVID days. So that resilience, both at a human level and as well as a market perception level, is in a much better space. So I'm less worried today than I would have been 5 years ago, because we've all been tried and tested through lots of challenging times. And I truly believe in the resilience of economies, in the resilience of the human spirit and corporations.
You know, the market resilience, and that's something that we were talking about, and they seem to be disconnected with the headlines. I mean, the headlines are screaming negative news at you virtually every single second, and yet the markets globally have held on and have continued to touch new records. What do you make of the capital market strength, and how do you see that progressing from here on?
So if you think about it, there's a lot of liquidity in the system. So there are investors who clearly are making choices in terms of where they want to invest. And the markets are looking at a world where the middle class population is growing. There are more individuals who are coming into the investor base for the markets. And the markets have got used to, in the last 5 years, a lot of points of reference at which the markets felt like this is the end of things, and yet the markets recovered. So that experience from a market perception perspective and an overall optimism to say, yes, trade agreements, deals will be done, and we'll all be in a comfortable space. And most countries also have done a lot of self-help. So that all helps in terms of the market sentiment overall.
You know, you talked about trade deals, and it depends on who is tweeting whom and that trade deals are being done or undone. But given the fact that the expectation was that we're going to go into an era of deglobalization, what we have seen more of is reglobalization. We've seen many more bilateral agreements, bilateral arrangements being worked out. How does that, what are the opportunities that you believe that you're likely to see in the midst of all of this as we see this globalization 2.0 or 3.0, whatever you'd like to call it? You know, how do you see the opportunities opening up?
So firstly, you know, as everybody recognizes, and we see with our own customers, that we are facing a world which is different. It brings the best in people in terms of seeing what else they can do to navigate their way through. And in those kind of circumstances, the bilateral agreements clearly on a rise. You've had more bilateral agreements recently than you've had for many years before. And that helps in terms of corporates adjusting their business models, countries being really moved in terms of the crisis they face in certain situations to do their best to engage. So I look at in all of that, everybody is facing a new challenge, a different world, and within that, they're finding the pathway that best works for them.
Well, speaking about finding pathways, you're in the midst of a restructuring exercise. Explain the rationale behind that and what you hope to be able to achieve at the end of it, not just in terms of business outcomes for the bank, but also in terms of financial metrics that you're going to be tracking very closely.
And we are already. So from our perspective, the ethos of the transformation we're doing is we want to be very simple in how we operate so that we can best deliver to our customers and meet their needs. So that was one driver. As a consequence of that, of course, there'll be some deduplication in the cost base, and also the fact that we have called out 4 business areas that are our priority, which is our 2 home markets, as well as the CIB business and the wealth business. We have the conviction to drive performance in those areas with greater operating leverage. So it's clarity and simplification with a cornerstone of supporting our customers, and then as a consequence of that, having a performance metric that we can stand behind and deliver and hopefully outperform.
So do you believe that this will now help you accelerate the kind of growth targets that you have been accustomed to? Do you believe that this could perhaps be a step up as far as the growth aspiration is concerned for the bank?
So let me just share with you. We normally give targets which are 1-year targets. We have given 3-year target. That is based upon our conviction on what we can deliver. As you can imagine, in order to give those targets, we look at a whole range of scenarios. We have a whole range of levers that we can utilize in order to meet those targets. And that confidence is enabled by having clarity of focus and strategy. And then that becomes the foundation to grow faster because you've got key areas where you know you're going to grow and you know you've got the competitive strength. And that's how we want to drive our strategy.
You know, so what would you say today is the key competitive strength for HSBC? We were talking about how the American banks are doing and where you find yourself as far as the market cap sweepstakes are concerned, but that's a different story altogether. What do you believe today is the HSBC big advantage, is the HSBC big competitive strength?
So let me just come from an India perspective to begin with. We are the largest international bank in India. We have stood by our franchises through all times. We are a customer-driven organization, so we want to do more with our customers. We don't want to be just individual product-led. That gives us the staying power, that gives us the loyal customer base, and a highly motivated employee proposition. And in a world where there are very few competitors who have kept that global presence, not just in one business line or one product, but across a customer base of wealth customers, retail, corporate, multinationals, mid-market, top-tier local corporations. So we really cover that entire breadth, but with a customer lens. And we genuinely believe that if we serve our customers to the best of our ability, that's what drives our performance. And that's what gives us the staying power and sustainability of performance.
You know, this is the stuff that's in your control of what you can actually deliver in terms of both what the customer wants of you and the performance that you hope to drive through that. But let's talk about what's not in your control, the interest rate trajectory globally. I mean, you know, you have, of course, in the US, the clamor for the Fed to cut interest rates. In India, we've seen interest rates coming off quite sharply. What's the global perspective on where rates could be headed in 2025?
So I've always said for our major currencies that we deal with, as long as the rates are around the 3% mark, which is where most of them are likely to be. And for us, it is the Hong Kong dollar, it's the US dollar, it's sterling, and to some extent the euro. We feel quite comfortable because we have a very strong balance sheet. We have also structural hedges in place, which give us a predictable banking NII, which is a key driver of our bottom line performance. We are blessed with having a very strong deposit base. We have earned that because our customers trust us to keep their most valuable asset, i.e. their cash, their money with us. And alongside that, we are driving performance in order to build our fee income. So all those things put together, we feel very comfortable that our performance drivers are well in place, and now we just have to continue to execute. And all banks need to be looking at how their performance would be in what you call normalized interest rates. Now, we've been through all kinds of interest rate trajectories, very high, very low. So we have given this sort of range to say, for us, a normalized around the 3% is a healthy number for most of the developed markets. And that's sort of in line with looking at where inflation is, but also looking at credit costs. Because when interest rates are too high, obviously you get hurt from a credit cost perspective. And hopefully with that predictability of the interest rates, macro environment settling down, we will see also growth in lending, and that covers the full picture from our performance perspective.
So what would you see as the key risks to the scenario that you just outlined, which is, a normalized interest rate environment with global growth being stable? What could be the potential shocks that you are preparing or prepared for?
In terms of shocks, we constantly look at downside scenarios. We look at upside, downside, and through this range of scenarios, we actually build where we think our financial resource planning should be. And as part of that, we will have our management actions that we can take in order to keep our performance in a predictable space from our perspective. Of course, there are things that can happen. And the risk you can look at is whether it's, cyber-related risks, whether it is in terms of natural disasters. I mean, there's a range of things that we can't control. But what we can do is best risk manage ourselves in terms of the what-if scenario analysis on how to react to those situations.
We were talking about the what-ifs, and one of the aspects that you touched upon was cybersecurity. But outside of cybersecurity, there's a whole digital world and a digital economy that is on steroids, quite literally, and specifically here in India, an explosive growth that we've seen. Now, how do you deploy capital as you prioritize the role that HSBC is going to play in this digital economy?
So whether it's digital economy or AI, we absolutely want to invest for the future. What it means from our perspective is how much investment we do in terms of building for the future while balancing what we need to do here and now. And from a capital perspective, it's really quite simple. We have a dividend payout ratio of 50%, which is our starting point. We are very comfortable with that. We then look at areas where we can grow, whether it's organic or inorganic, and we want to grow. And then the residual amount is what we then consider for capital distribution back to our shareholders in terms of share buyback. So it's a very clear stack, and the primary objective is to grow the business in the areas where we have competitive strength, and we will continue to do so.
AI specifically, and I think every industry at this point in time is grappling with what is this going to mean, both in terms of workflow, workforce, the number of people that you employ, etc. How do you see AI changing the shape, the very nature of banking? What would HSBC 5 years on account of AI look like?
So from an AI perspective, you have to pick up those areas where because of your scale, you can have some benefit in terms of productivity. But given we are a highly regulated industry, there is always going to be a human in the loop. So I look at AI in terms of scalable instances where we can deploy AI, but also where you can make the day-to-day work that your colleagues do a little bit easier through deployment of AI. And the whole purpose is that once you've deployed AI in those pockets, the work that your colleagues do overall becomes a work which is more rewarding. And when you grow, you have the operating leverage to grow your top line without having the same increase in terms of your FTE or headcount for every element of growth that you bring in. And that's the real benefit of AI. And that then obviously gives you the performance levers.
So there's decoupling between revenue and headcount. I mean, what are we talking about from where we are today to what it could potentially be 5 years on?
The way I look at it is you use your existing resources to do more, as opposed to, because you're doing more, you need to build up your existing resource base the same way. That's the big difference.
You know, I think, I can't remember which cover story it was, but a recent cover story talking about the existential problem as far as the consulting business is concerned on account of AI, for instance. I mean, you know, do you look at that as a challenge or as an opportunity for the bank?
So I look at it as that if I'm spending all my time doing the tasks that AI could do for me, whether it's in terms of reviewing my policy documents, whether it's in terms of doing routine tasks, then how can I use my resources, my time, which is my most valuable resource, in a more productive manner in terms of looking forward, in terms of what the organization is, you know, going to be doing in the future, as opposed to being caught in the day-to-day routine administrative tasks. Now, you're absolutely right, whether it's consulting, whether it's coding, there are a lot of areas where AI is doing a lot of work that humans did before. And that is a social challenge for society in terms of what does it mean in terms of how you reskill yourself, in terms of the kind of jobs that will be available. But I do believe that at the end of the day, AI is a tool for humans. It doesn't replace humans.
How much of it do you use yourself personally?
I do use AI to do what I would call routine tasks. And there's a distinction between AI and generative AI.
Yes.
So most of us are quite familiar with AI. To be fair, on generative AI, there's still a long way to go.
A long way to go. But, you know, as you look at how banking has evolved and changed in the last 30 plus years, from your vantage point as a CFO, what do you believe are the areas that you need to focus on today to ensure that you fortify yourself for the future?
So a couple of things. You know, banking changes because customers' expectations and needs change. So that's the fundamental. We are in a business where customers are the center of everything, so you need to evolve according to this changing customer needs. Banking also changes because expectations change in terms of how quickly people want those needs to be fulfilled. So you need to respond to that. It's very different from where it was, you know, 3.5 decades ago. I also think from a underlying connectivity perspective and the way economies are growing so quickly, both from an emerging markets perspective and the role that the developed markets are having, there is a shift in balance, whether it's from a demographics perspective, whether it's a product proposition. So that all impacts banking. But fundamental to all of this is also our own employees and their needs and the culture that you drive in the organization. And that, to me, is the most important factor when you want to drive performance in a place, because that's what sustains performance. That's what truly helps you to execute on your strategy. And there are other competitors who are non-banks in the world today. And given those other competitors, the way you position yourself and how you look at, you know, your competitive strengths is different. What's most important in banking, like in any other industry, is you can't become a dinosaur. You have to be forward-looking. You can't sit on your laurels. You have to be at your best as you evolve.
Well, you know, you're absolutely right. You have to look forward, and I think that's the job of a leader as well. But, you know, I want to end where we started, with the fact that you've created history by becoming the first woman to take on the role of the CFO at HSBC. And That's great, but the question is, why has it taken so long to get you in that position? And that's why we're actually with HSBC running a campaign called Future Female Forward to mainstream conversations around creating workplaces that are much more inclusive and merit-based. In your experience, and we can argue about whether there are glass ceilings still or not, but in your experience, what do organizations need to do? What do you believe organizations will need to do in the future to ensure that we don't have a conversation where 160 years from now there's a woman at the top?
So a couple of things. Firstly, I'm a great believer in meritocracy because that's the only sustainable way to progress. But in order to have real meritocracy, organizations have to create an environment where everybody can achieve their full potential. And there are inherent biases. Could be anything like people wanting to hire in their own image. So I want to hire somebody who's got exactly the same experience as me, who looks like me, because I feel more comfortable. Whereas the reality is, if you hire diverse talent, if you hire people with diverse experiences, you bring the best decision making. And that is the real commercial imperative to make sure that meritocracy progresses in as inclusive a manner as possible. And that's what I hope organizations going forward will do, because that is the way they can best serve their customer base, and they can make sure that they attract, retain, and develop all their talent. Because if you don't create that environment, talent has choice. They'll go and work elsewhere. So as leaders, as managers, you need to absolutely stand behind meritocracy, but a meritocracy in which everybody has the opportunity to bring their best to work.
What was the hardest part of working your way up the corporate ladder? And, you know, I'm sure that there have been moments of self-doubt and questions. How did you deal with that, of walking into rooms where you were probably the only woman? How did you deal with that?
You know, it starts with being comfortable in yourself. If you're comfortable in yourself without trying to be somebody else, that gives you the innate confidence to just bring your whole self to whatever situation you are in. And that's how I always look at myself. And there are moments I do it better, and there are moments where I'm, even today, not at my best, and you just have to learn to live with it. But every time you go through one of those experiences, you should energize yourself and feel inspired by the things you've done well. But in the same token, I'm always very reflective of things I can do better. And if each day I do that, you just get better.
What do you miss the most about being in India?
The thing about India, which I'll always miss and remember, and I'm married to a German, my husband says the same about India, is just the color, the depth of color in the country. Color in everything. Color in what you wear, the color in the culture, and it's actually very energizing. It is so vibrant, and that's just so uplifting and so optimistic.
So it's a good thing you have HSBC, because it doesn't get more colorful than the lovely HSBC red,
color,
right?
I know, it's an auspicious color for India as well.
Well, Pam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on the Global Dialogue. We look forward to seeing more of you here in India, and we wish you the very best of luck with all that you have planned for HSBC over the next few years. Many, many thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Shereen, for the opportunity.
It's been
delightful to have a few thoughts exchanged with you.
Thank you so much. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of the Global Dialogue. From all of us here, for now, on the team, goodbye. Many thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week. Till then, thanks very much.